I wanted to tell you a story about a young priest I met quite a few years ago. When I met him, he was just about to be transferred into another parish, and he was very excited about it. He didn't know exactly where the area was. He actually didn't even know how to get there. It was before GPS. And he told me he was very excited because there was a rather large parish. There were 5,000 families in the parish. And he said that was wonderful, but it also presented some challenges for him. Because the parish was so large, he had a lot of things to do with regard to bringing intimacy into the parish. And he mentioned a phrase that I'd never heard before, but you heard spoken several times a night. He mentioned small faith group. That young priest that I met was 49 years old at the time. The parish he was going to was St. Andrew, and the priest was Father Picard. So when he came to our parish in 1988, Monsignor Picard, who was Father Picard at that time, was 49 years old. He came to the parish with a lot of things on his agenda. One thing at the top of his list was creating small faith groups. And he immediately went to work in the parish, gathered parishioners, and started planning on starting small faith groups. The first one that I was aware of started with 5 men in the rectory. Father Joe Tracy was in our parish at the time, and he started it. That developed into a group of men that exceeded 60 guys after about 5 years. The second large group that I was aware of was actually Becca's father, Barry Pine, who's here tonight, who started in his home the same way with a couple men. And that turned into, Barry, how many guys do you have in the group now? Barry said 80 guys. So on any given morning when they meet in the old church in the basement, there's 80 men that pray and break out together in small faith groups. Those groups have continued on our parish, and today there is several hundred men and women that meet regularly in small faith groups. Going back to Monsignor Ricard, true to his word, he knew that small faith groups were good for our parish, and consequently it was also good for him. So 30 years ago, a little over 30 years ago, Monsignor Ricard joined the small faith group. And I can tell you for the last 30 years, we have met on Wednesday morning at 7:30 and discussed what is going on in our life. You can imagine that when we started that group, most of us in our 30s, 40s. After 30 years, we experienced a lot. We went through a lot, and I can tell you that we've experienced joyful baptisms, we experienced joyful weddings, and unfortunately, we experienced quite a few funerals. I will tell you in that 30-year period, speaking for myself, we lost our son Ronnie in a car accident. And I will tell you honestly that I lost myself. And for months and months, I continued to go to our small faith group. And were it not for the 6 men in that small faith group, I can assure you that I would not be standing here tonight. I'm not sure I'd be standing anywhere. But for months, I struggled with confusion, with questions, with anger, and frankly, I was having difficulty with the Lord, blaming God for the loss of our son. By the grace of God and the patience of the men that were in that small faith group, they showed me love, they showed me compassion, they showed me patience, and over time, you never get healed from that, but I certainly am able to live a fruitful and productive life. A few years ago, suddenly, I lost my wife. She passed away at our home at the Jersey Shore. And when I went down to the shore to take care of what I had to take care of, and when it was finished, I drove home that night. It was in the middle of the night, and by the time I got home to our house, it was 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. When I opened up the door to walk in the house, there were 6 men there at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. It was Monsignor Ricard and 5 other guys. It showed me their love, their compassion, and shortly thereafter, Monsignor celebrated Mass in our living room and offered it up for my wife, Marie. There are many other things that happen in small faith groups. There's another group that I'm involved in. I just want to tell you it's a lot lighter, but at the same time it's serious and it's something maybe you can relate to. One of the fellows in the small faith group came and told us when he went home from work that night, he was having problems with his older son that he couldn't resolve, and he worked on it for a long time. When he went home, he was going to tell his son to pack his bag and get out of the house. We sat there throughout that small faith group and listened to him, asked him questions, and I'm sure while he was talking, men in the small faith group, there were about 12 of us in a group, there were men in there praying for him. When the small faith group was over, John stood up with tears in his eyes, thanked every one of us, and said, when I go home tonight after work, I'm going to look at my son in the eye, put my arms around him, give him a hug, tell him I love him, and say, by the grace of God, we're going to work out this problem. That happened in the small faith group. Last story. The gospel reading for the first Sunday of February was the gospel passage where Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law. And within that gospel, which we all read, and I read it, I missed the phrase. It said that Jesus said, and for this is my purpose. It's why I came. And the way we start our small faith group is it's a short prayer. We read the gospel for the coming Sunday, and then we sit quietly, and each man in the group thinks about what that gospel is telling him right now. Words that Jesus Christ spoke 2,000 years ago, but is speaking to us this morning. And because we're all different, we take different things from the gospel. We sat quietly after that reading, and one of the guys said, hey, fellas, do you know what your purpose is in life? And we all looked at him. And for the next hour or hour and a half, 12, 13, 14 guys, however many of us were in that room, talked about knowing what our purpose in life is, knowing that the purpose in life that we have, that was given to us by God, is to be a good husband and a good father. And for an hour and a half, that's what we talked about. And it was beautiful, the things that the men said about their families. And I thought after the guys left, how wonderful it was going to be that night when they got home to their families. They're the kinds of things that happen in small faith groups. When Monsignor came here, I told you, he was 49 years old, and he started small faith groups. And he said, I'm going to pray and pray and pray. That was 36 years ago. And I can assure you that Monsignor still prays for small faith groups. And so I'm going to ask you to consider something. This May the 30th is our Monsignor Picard's 86th birthday. He continues to pray for you in hopes that you join a small faith group. I'm going to ask you to give yourself a present for Monsignor's birthday. Unwrap the package that he's been praying to give you for the last 36 years and consider deeply joining a small faith group. It's not, as Jimmy said, it's not a bunch of guys that understand Scripture, that open up the Bible every day. They're guys like you and me that are dealing with life's issues and can find answers within Jesus Christ and being with a group of men that you learn to respect and trust. I would hope that you would consider it. It's not a lifelong commitment. I would hope it to be. But what it could be is a commitment you can make for Lent. And if you're a nervous type like many of us are, you might consider asking a friend to join with you. But please consider giving yourself and your family what I think is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. And again, give your family, give your kids, give your husband, give your wife. And that's the peace and joy that you will get from spending time with a group of men or women that you will develop a relationship like you've never had in your life before, that will be there and be a circle of love for you when you get through the tragedies in life that I have and most of us have. God bless you and thank you.